All right, we are back. Dynasty Trades in 5. I'm Clay.
Oh, I'm feeling sky high about this one.
I'm
Scott.
Scott.
I ruined Scott, apparently. I broke Scott. I'm sorry, audience.
That's all you gotta. Okay, so tonight we're doing Dak Prescott. He's been kind of underwhelming, and maybe he's more attainable than he has been in the past. Big offense, but yeah, he's just not putting up fantasy points right now, and it's kind of frustrating. But Scott, what are your thoughts on Dak?
Yeah, I mean, before the season, I think a lot of people put Dak up in the top 4 or 5, barring that he came back from his ankle surgery, which, I mean, that really isn't an issue, at least for on the surface, hasn't been. But I think people just kind of looked at last year's pace. He had a 5-game pace that literally would have broken like every single record. And we just projected that onto, this year and go, well, the ceiling for Dak is incredibly high, which I mean, I can't argue that he could have a season or two where he does have a super high ceiling. He is a really efficient passer, but I think the one thing is he's not running the ball. He only has, I think, 105 yards rushing on the season thus far. So it's just not, you're not really getting that extra 2 or 3 points every single week that you hope for that you're getting from some of these other guys. But I mean, not putting up fantasy points, I mean, I think that's a little bit of stretch. I mean, if you just look at points per game, he's still, in the top 10, top 11. I mean, he's still a QB1. It's just not a QB3 or QB4 overall. It's more probably QB7, QB10 range. We didn't really talk about him yet. We haven't done a Burrow video, but I think him and Burrow are basically the same thing at this point. Like they have the weapons, they have the offense, they have the system. So you feel safe with those two guys. But do I want to pay a super premium for them compared to Mahomes or Lamar or Kyler and Josh Allen? I know those guys are a little fragile, but just what they can give you in terms of weekly ceiling is incredibly high. With Dak, you're hoping for yardage, you're hoping for a passing game script, but it's just a tick below those other guys. So I think we'll get into trade value, but let's hear Shane's thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean it's hard to look at him as elite. Like I don't just because you're top 12 doesn't mean you're elite. I don't know if we've touched on it on this show before, but if we haven't, guess what? Just being top 12 doesn't mean you're elite. The running back 12, the quarterback 12, wide receiver 12. They're good. They're very good. They're not elite. And that's what I think we hoped that Dak was going to be. And that's what we thought Dak was. I it's just hard to believe he's the same guy as we saw last year, right? In those however many games we saw. I mean, part of it was the Dallas defense was historically bad. Like it was on pace to give up like the most points ever in the game of football, at any level. I might be off on that. I don't know, but their defense was absolutely horrendous. So they had to throw a lot. So he was throwing for 400 yards. His
And it's
attempts,
been good this year.
yeah, his attempts a bit were out of the world, out of this world. This year, they have a good defense. They don't need him to do it. Can he? Probably, but he definitely doesn't look like the same guy as he did before the ankle injury. So I think it's a little bit of the ankle injury, and I think it's a little bit of the defense is better for Cowboys.
So would you go Dak or Justin Fields and call it the 108?
I'd go Fields on the 108.
Oh yeah, I'm going Fields easily.
Yep.
Easily. All right. So what if it were Fields in the 111?
I'm still going easily.
It's closer. I think like we've talked about the pick ranges. There's going to probably be a tier break somewhere in that 106 to
Right.
108 range where it's like, man, I'm still getting a first round receiver or a top 50 pick at running back or one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks, and then it's going to drop off. So I think that's a fair deal. I think if you're a team that's like right now on the precipice of winning, I like the idea of getting an extra pick in Fields though, because literally we could look up in 12 months if the Bears hire the right GM and the right coach, we could be looking up next year and going like, man, Fields' ceiling is higher than Dak.
Would you rather have Kirk Cousins and Jerry Judy or Dak Prescott?
I think that's one where I know you're a huge Judy fan, but I think that's one where you're kind of taking a little bit of a risk on both sides, but I'd rather have the one piece versus if that's a pick instead of Jerry Judy, then I'm intrigued. Kind of like Fields if it's a higher pick, but if it's just a receiver, not that Judy's not good, but I think the smart move is to do the Fields versus and pick deal for Dak because you're paying a scare tax, right? Like there's still like probably 20% of you that thinks, oh, Fields could be a bust. So to get Dak for him, all I have to give up is a 111. Like that makes you feel safe. But if you're really trying to win, you're probably going, man, I'm betting Fields hits his ceiling, and literally he's going to be better than Dak. So,
What about you on that one, Shane? Kirk Cousins and
Judy's
Judy
not,
or Dak?
Judy's a dude. He's not enough to move the needle for me. So I'm gonna go with the guy that I like better, and that's gonna be Dak.
Let's go the other way, or I'll just leave it open-ended. What would you add on to Dak to get up to, let's say, Herbert?
It's too much. I mean, the guy's gonna want at least. I mean, if he takes a singular first and Dak to get to Herbert, that's great. I don't think he will or she. I think they'd want at least multiple firsts, and I'm not willing to pay that price.
I mean, I think that's where if you can give one of those picks where you're predicting is going to be outside of the tier break, like maybe 109, 110, then, and maybe do it before everyone knows where the picks are going to land. It's probably too late now because the playoffs are almost over, but like send that ambiguous first for, that deal and see if you can pull off the swap. And just one thing to add, I think what we're seeing is we've seen it with Mahomes, we've seen it with Burrow, we've seen it with Dak. Everyone predicted their defenses to suck. Yet all of a sudden we look up and it's like, damn, their defenses are actually pretty good, and they limit you from getting into these, holy crap game scripts every single week. So I think there's a potential that these guys have another season or two down the road where it's like, yeah, their defense lost a lot of guys. They're super injured. You know what I mean? Like you put one of those guys on like the Ravens right now. It's like they'd probably be putting up more fantasy points just because that's the game script that the team gets in. But unfortunately, it's like, their defenses are good. So you watch a Cowboys game, it's like they don't have to do much and they can still win. It's a little frustrating. I think the tier down targets are Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Trey Lance is risky, but I mean, I think you could look up in a year and say, I got the better quarterback. Yep. Or an equivalent quarterback that we have in this tier. It doesn't take a lot to get into that. Like Shane said, just because you're a low-end QB1, most of the low-end QB1s aren't putting up, difference-making fantasy performances. You just feel safe, like, hey, they're going to be around for 5+ years. That's really what you're paying for. So I think you tear down to those rookies. I think that's probably the move and try to get a first. I love that.